And news just in from the House of Commons. The Prime Minister has confirmed that all internet servers have failed.
The station started messing up, like really going wrong. And then people started pushing and shoving.
I was there for hours and hours, no food, no people, and eventually I had to try and get out.
I'm thinking this could be aliens.
Welcome back to the My Generation podcast. My name is Max, and on today's show, I'm going to be talking about something you probably don't know about me. We're talking about the creation of a radio drama. I was the writer and director of said radio drama for Screen South, and joined on the show with me is producer for that radio drama. It's Dan Johnson.
Hello.
Welcome to the show, Dan. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Happy to be here.
Lovely. Well, thank you for coming on. This should be actually a fairly easy show because we're just talking about our experience with what it was like putting together a radio drama, from writing the script and sending it off to, for your case, producing it and bringing the whole thing to life, and then putting it all together and having something you can listen to. We're going to sort of start off. I'm just going to say where you can find it firstly. So in the description of this, I'm going to link to the BBC Sounds website link where you can go and listen to the radio drama. It is called The Day the Internet Stood Still, and myself and Dan are going to talk through what it was like to put that together over the next sort of 40 minutes or so. So starting off really, Dan, we'll talk sort of about what is Screen South and why we both got interested in it. How did you first hear about it?
Okay, so we had a spokesperson come to the university to give us all a talk about what they're looking for, what kind of branded content they were after, and I guess the brands they're after are kind of the younger generation of people around our age, which is handy because we are our age. Ideas that are fresh and don't really have a place specifically in terms of like television, or a voice that you don't normally hear, which we all jumped at because why wouldn't you? It's very rare that someone hands you like an opportunity like that on a plate and says, jump on it. Yeah,
and we got to work with budgets, real actors, real industry people, and that chance was incredible. So they were looking for films, they're looking for audio pieces, and also virtual reality as well, weren't they? And we submitted for audio, which is why we've got a radio drama as our finished product, along with some other creators that also made radio. We went up to start the process. I was right at the beginning with the script. I'll just talk through that, and then at the point when Dan comes in. The script was a concept I'd sort of been thinking about with my dad. It's called The Day the Internet Stood Still. We were spitballing ideas as to what sort of War of the Worlds level events could happen in the modern day. And when we started talking about this idea, everyone we mentioned it to sort of had an idea as to what would happen if this was to happen in real life. And the sort of catastrophic events that may happen, but also the beautiful ones that may happen when people are spending less time on the internet. So I went up to London for the interview for it. It was a really great process. They asked a lot of really deep questions about the project, and then once the project actually got accepted, I was with you at the time, and me and Dan we were at work on another project, weren't we?
We were, and we both cried, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Because at that point I was basically like, right, I don't think it's going to get accepted because I guarantee so many other people are submitting. But if it does get accepted, Dan, you're producing this.
And I agreed because I thought it wasn't going to get accepted. Honestly, it was a lot of pressure, and I thought, I'll help a friend out. I'll just say I'll be there, and I won't need to do it. And then it happened. And that was terrifying, but one of the best opportunities I've had, I think, ever.
Yeah, so what was it like the moment for you when we first heard? Because we'd literally just finished shooting on another project, and we were literally walking home. We were saying goodbye to the last of the actors that was leaving, walking home, and then I get the email that says it's happening.
Instant reaction, oh my god, great opportunity, amazing. About halfway home, I started thinking, oh, I can't do this. That's a budget that we haven't had. That's more than 100 times any budget that we've been looking to have, and something way bigger and way different from anything that you or I had ever done, and I think it's fair to say probably will do for a bit of time at least. a lot of excitement, a lot of pressure, quite a lot of fear.
But yeah, we were sort of thrown into the unknown, weren't we? Because it was our first time really. We worked together before, but we'd never worked together with a budget, had we? So
No, I think the most budget we had was like £100 that we'd spent between us on other projects.
yeah, and just on like food and travel. Whereas this, we had budget to work with. And I remember when I was walking home, I couldn't stop like talking. I couldn't stop like jumping around in celebration. I forgot that I'd cycled to town, and I walked almost the entire way home before I realised that I'd left my bike in town. I just forgot everything that was going on around me. I don't know if you felt the same, where the whole world just kind of disappeared for a bit.
Yeah, I genuinely thought that we were heading back to the university, and then when I got home, I was like, oh, okay, this will do. It was a lot going on and a lot of pressure. I was overthinking a little bit on that day, and I just completely forgot where I was.
But I think that is also kind of the beauty of this kind of project, because it gives young people who've never made anything on a scale before the chance to make that happen. And you got to work with the budget. So if we, the next thing I wanted to touch on was, if we get my notes up, so we've gone through the concept, we've got Dan getting on board. Yeah, it really starts to work into how we budgeted it, because I had all these great sort of ideas of things I wanted to do, but some of them were too unrealistic in that first script draft. So it changed. We honed it in, we focused on just a few characters rather than my initial idea, which had a lot more. What was it like for you budgeting and working out the logistics?
I think initially you had something like 10 characters and you wanted to add more. At the end, I think we used 5.
Yeah.
Something like that. Because if you were paying them like the actual industry salary that you would get, that would be way more than half our budget, and we still need to get studio space, any sound effects that we need to pay for, and obviously the hours of everyone involved, plus our expenses as well, because we can't really afford to travel and eat as university students and do a project like that.
Yeah, under the logistics, it was quite interesting, because obviously we had to... It's all those little costs you don't really think about. So it's like the hotels you have to sort of pay for, the food for not only you but all the cast members. They all tot up, don't they?
They do, and there were a bunch of things that I wasn't expecting to have to pay for that we had to pay for. Hard drives are one that it seems obviously like something you need when you say it, but if I came up to someone and said, name like 20 things that you need for a project, that wouldn't be something that anyone would say, I don't think.
And yeah, there was just a lot throughout the project that I don't think we expected. So one of the big things was emails. The project really opens you into the world of what it's like to work in the professional industry. We had an incredible executive producer on board who helped me with the casting. And a lot of it existed in nothing but pure emails for sort of 4 or 5 months, didn't it? And then suddenly you've got 2 days and you're making the whole thing. I remember in terms of the casting, it was interesting because I was given access to a pool of sort of audio tapes of people that I might be interested in getting involved. And it was really nice to have that creative freedom to then, with our budget that you'd sort of started to plan, choose people that fitted the role. And I think you and other people within our class definitely helped hone me as to how the script needed to be in the final draft.
Yeah, we were quite brutal with that. But you have to be at the same time.
Yeah.
I remember handing you the script that me and Maisie had marked up with a bunch of feedback. And it's very hard when you have an idea to get it on paper, because you're going through the whole idea at once. Instead of bit by bit, it could be quite hard to like spread everything out the way it should be, and have it make sense at first.
But yeah, feedback definitely added to it. Like I think your Maisie's feedback, because Maisie also helped with the script writing. So many people in the class helped bring this project to life, which is why it was really great. In fact, all the music in it is done by Luke Hill, who is a fantastic musician within our class as well. And the feedback that Screen South also gave. I think my second draft of the script, after we got the feedback from them, I completely rewrote, and I don't think a single line of dialogue from that second draft actually made it into the final bit.
I think the title and the general character concepts are more or less the only thing that went unchanged. It ended up being a little bit longer, but snappier, I would say.
Yeah.
I think.
especially when you're honing down from the amount of characters and the scope I wanted to then making it. You had less characters, but you had so much more quality because they had more time to speak, really, didn't they?
And it was more specific. It felt more real.
Yeah, and so we've gone through sort of the casting and logistics. I wanted to sort of go over the day of shooting and then the day of editing. This fantastic project that existed in nothing but emails for 4 or 5 months. How are you feeling sort of the week before? Because we had basically one day to create this whole thing. We had all the actors booked in to come down, and then we had one day to edit it. How did you feel in that week when you were getting ready?
There was a lot more pressure in that last week than I think there was any other point. Even on the filming days, I felt less pressure than I did the week before. We were 90% done with production. It was almost done. But that last 10% is the slow 10%. So the entire time I was messaging you or messaging friends and saying, "Ooh, I don't know if this is going to happen. We're really close, and I know that it will be fine, but there's that 10% that isn't quite done yet."
Yeah, I think that's because when you actually get to the filming days, they feel a little bit easier because you've put in the 6 months of work to make it so those 2 days go seamlessly.
And it feels real. For some reason, my brain thought, "You're not doing it yet, so it's not real yet." And then when you show up on the actual day and see people saying the words that you've written or helped to write and produce and paid for, it's insane. It's a feeling that I don't think I've really felt before or felt since, because with a student project, you know that it's going to be done and you're with the entire team making it all the time. There isn't that distance with emails.
Yeah, I think that's because everyone in this project, and I think this speaks to the sort of industry, was freelance. So we had a really great freelance sound designer come in. We had someone who was on work experience helping sort of as an assistant producer, executive producers. We had the people from the top of Screen South coming in and guiding us and overlooking what we were doing, had a production partner. But these were all sort of freelancey bits that were just gelled for this project. And each sort of Screen South project requires different inputs as well, which is beautiful because they can accommodate what different types of things you're making. So I think that's probably why it didn't feel real until you were making it.
Yeah, I wasn't even sure that I would be there on the actual day until relatively close to doing it. And when we booked the hotel, I thought, is there room in the budget for both of us to be there? Is there room for food and drink and stuff like that? It turned out better than I thought it would, the budget itself, although there was a lot of help from the higher-ups with that.
And I think it was actually quite important to have you there for me as well, being like the person who wrote it. I still feel like I needed that one layer removed, and because I think we were both nervous, rightly, but excited, and I think you would have probably been upset to miss it, and I would have been like, "Oh, I'm in this on my own now again."
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that's great about being the producer when the director is at the same university doing the same course and in the same class all the time, is that you do the work without realizing it. We would just have a conversation on the walk home and end up accidentally producing quite a bit of the actual project without even really sitting down and producing it.
Yeah, it just exists in conversations. It's just, I didn't realize how important meetings were.
Yeah, and then we kind of had them on a walk home or something like that, and then I would sit down and write everything up. And then it went through a lot of loops, the project, a lot of changes, and not necessarily everything you do as a producer sticks. At one point we thought we were going to film it here. At one point we thought we were going to use actors that we didn't end up using.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, the actor list changed, the entire location for filming changed, didn't it?
And I don't think that would have been something that we had as like a plan B if it wasn't for us being so close, like physically, like in terms of distance to each other. I don't think that would have been something we could have had prepared at all.
Yeah, and so do you think the projects we sort of worked on before together helped influence that?
I think so too, yeah. Understanding how you work as a director and understanding how I work as a producer, because I normally just talk to you and then from your notes I will go off and do the producer paperwork and then bring in a bunch of spreadsheets that don't get used, but like influence how the project goes for the entire time.
Yeah, we sort of give each other realistic expectations as well, don't we? Because if, especially you needed to hone me in, because I think at the start, and I think this is true of all writers, you sort of shoot for the stars, and sometimes you think of things that are logistically maybe too difficult, but that's why this process is so good, because it helps you produce something linear and that you can do that still like keeps the voice. Like I liked that in your producing and how everyone else still kept to my original vision. Even though things were changing, the core stayed the same, which was really nice.
Yeah, and the core is what they're after more than anything. That's the reason that it can't be like a 40-year-old writer who's been doing writing for years. I think to a certain extent, every young person that writes needs some refinement, and that's why there will be a lot of change. Same for a young producer. I think I was one of the youngest producers there.
No, you sure were. I mean, you're younger than me, and I was the youngest, one of the youngest writer-directors there, so yeah.
I think the fact that you need refinement is also part of the charm. The fact that it's an idea that a young person would have, not a 40-year-old writer. I think that's really why the core was never going to change.
Yeah, and I think that obviously other writers, they have their place as well, but this project is so honed in for young writers. Because this is, we're based in Kent, where this show is at the moment, wherever you're listening from, and so this opportunity is available in the southeast, but this is funded by BBC Arts, and so there will be something like this across the country for you. So if you're not listening in the county of Kent, there will be an opportunity for you to get involved in this, especially if you're a university student. I'd say if you've got no experience working with budgets, get a producer like Dan alongside you who can help you through. So I think I would have really struggled, and the project would not have ever come out the same way it had without you on it as well. Same with Luke, who was also in our class doing the music. So and it still means that Dan, as a producer, he can still submit for next year because he wasn't the writer-director of this one.
Yeah, the producer doesn't have to be your closest friend, but it needs to be someone that you can communicate with and trust, because you're saying things and then at the end of the day they're making it happen, I think is the fairest way of putting it. I think that's kind of what the producer's job is more than anything.
Yeah, I think what helped it be rather seamless for our project is that even if things were changing, I think there was a mutual trust, not just between us two, but between everyone in the whole group. So if I was to send an email to the production partner or the exec producer or to you, I know those things are getting done, or if I need to do it, I'm going to get it done for them. Going back to the shooting day, though, what for you was it like working with the actors, almost a step removed as I was sort of directing them? What was it like being the producer in the room with them?
Mostly we were just having conversations. It was very friendly. The professionals, most of them are quite young. I think the news reporter was, I think, the oldest actress.
Yeah.
But still quite young. And she had a young voice, a voice that was really interesting. And it was great hearing how much people were interested in the actual premise of the show. And having conversations about that, things that we might not necessarily think about, that they didn't think about. And then having a conversation in offshoots on that was the best thing about the project.
Well, every actor actually brought something unique along with them, because when we both spoke to them, they had their own idea as to what would happen if the internet went down. And I thought that was really, really necessary, because it meant that they brought their own personal story to it. I forget who exactly said this, but one of them talked about their child and how they would feel being unable to communicate with the child. And all that stuff is really... because they'll bring that into the performance. So if their character is in fear, they can feel that fear through a real potential emotion, made it feel very real. And through that, I can only thank the exec producer, as well as I was quite happy with myself in terms of casting, because all the actors were incredible to work with, and to that standard, because we've only really worked with student actors before, but this opportunity, I would definitely recommend trying to work with actors within your project if you can, because it opens up doors that you wouldn't expect.
Definitely. They brought a lot to the table, and hearing them say what we've written down, it changed it a lot, I think. Obviously, things will change on the actual day, regardless, but hearing them act in a certain way as a director, do you think that changed much in what you
Yeah,
planned?
I think it did, because they because you sort of feel it within the influxes of their voice, and because you just see it on the page, don't you? And then when they actually start saying the words, you realise what the most important words in the line are, which are things that I wasn't even thinking about before. And then when you hear it, there might be a little change you want, and you express that, but then they nail that change. And I think it was Tim Jennings who played the character who was more of a conspiracy theorist. And Tim had gone away and actually researched conspiracy theory documentaries about the internet, and that helped inform what the character he would be playing would think like. And I'd never even thought about the actors going away and doing that, and so they brought completely new things to this that I couldn't anticipate, and I just had to try and hone that within the direction. And moving on to the second day, we only had 2 days to make this whole project. Physically, despite the fact that it goes on for such a long time, the process. And the second day was the edit. How did you feel? Because the edit was a longer day, much longer than the filming day.
It was a longer day, but it was... With the filming, it was about an hour each per actor, and that would get hammered out pretty quickly. And we actually went ahead of schedule. People showed up early, and on the actual editing day, because we had a whole bunch of notes to go off on what we wanted and what takes worked and what ones didn't. Getting the whole skeleton of the edit, where you have everything in the timeline working mostly, super quick. I was surprised at how quickly that worked out. Most of it was getting it to sound like the locations we wanted it, getting the pacing right.
We had a lot of decisions to make that day, and I think between you and Phoebe, who was the sort of assistant for it, her note taking as to what takes were good was very essential, because it meant that second day we could just go straight in, and we knew which ones we could ignore. We knew which ones where we might need like the beginning of one take and the end of another. And in radio, in the audio format, you just see it all fall in on the lines. It was great.
Definitely. And Andre, the sound recordist and editor, nailed it. I cannot emphasize how much of a help he was. And the way he communicated with us was really, really good. He was lighthearted, he was fun, and I just felt no pressure. If it was someone a little stony, a little less open to conversation, I think it could potentially have been a lot more nerve-wracking for both of us.
Yeah, well, I think it's very easy to see those 2 days of the making of it as all of the budget draining away with every second that's going by. But because everyone in the room was just having fun, it meant that it never really felt like we were spending money as we were going, even though I was scared that that's how I would feel about it. It just felt like a creative process from the exec all the way down to every assistant involved. Everyone felt like they weren't rushing. And even though toward the end of the day that we definitely went overtime on the edit because we just wanted to make sure we were happy with it, I don't think that mattered because we were all just there and having a good time.
We were cutting it very fine with the edit. We left and then barely caught the train that we were after.
Yeah, because we were getting the train home from the station, which was like a 25-minute walk from where we were in the studio. And then our train journey home was like 2.5 hours, wasn't it? Or 3 hours.
Yeah. The journey felt longer than the editing, which says a lot because the company during the editing was just full of energy.
I mean, we actually spent probably about 10 hours editing, I think. And I've had longer days at work that haven't tired me out so much. I think even though I didn't touch a single bit control or anything, I didn't put my hand on the keyboard, I was just there directing, making choices. That process taught me what a director does, like through and through, because you've just got to make sure everything's under control. And I just remember being that actual editing process was so fun, hearing it all fall into line. Because when we were actually recording with the actors, we recorded them all individually, and then except for the well, it was sort of including the reader Michael, his character, which sort of stuck with us throughout. That was played by Tom Glenister, and then hearing all these things that were sort of disjointed, layered, and working, and pointing everything to the place I knew I needed them to be. That was handy, especially with the amount of times me and you had read the script. We just knew to a T where everything had to go.
I didn't understand necessarily how to edit that and make it work, but we had possibly the best editor we could possibly have. And he's been working for a long time with that field, so it was incredible to see him do what he does.
Well, I think it was such a nice mix to have young people who were studying film production from our uni. Then we had sort of young people who were there just assisting the project. The production company, everyone there was really young, and then Phoebe. And then you had like the executive producer Caroline and Andre, the sound designer, who were very confident within the industry, and having that mix throughout the experiences was so helpful because we could look up to people, but we also had people on our level of experience, and everyone knew that we didn't have a ton of experience, which definitely took the edge off of it, I think, and should inform future projects. I just wanted to ask, what did you feel when you were sat on the train? We had 3 hours of it, so this was quite a long experience. Going home on the train with all of our stuff, sitting down, because the first sort of bit of it was direct, so we probably had about an hour of that, hour 20 of that journey, which was just sat on that first train. How did you feel slumped down in that chair after we'd made it?
For some reason, the train journey felt a lot longer than 3 hours. I was excited to sleep in my own bed for once. That was a long time coming. I hadn't seen it in 3 days. I went straight from work to the train station to record. So I hadn't actually had a decent night's sleep in a week when we were recording. I was still kind of surprised that it went off, how well it went. Hearing the actual end result, because what we had when we left the editing was pretty much what we had when it went on to BBC Sounds. I was still sort of shocked that it actually existed. It didn't feel real until I woke up the next morning to the WeTransfer file of it. And just being able to play that back and actually know that it happened is the best feeling, I think.
Yeah, and being able to go on BBC Sounds and type in the name of it the day the internet stood still and see it come up. Or even weirder for me is typing in my own name and seeing something come up, because I think that just auto-filled into the writer director bit. That's the weirdest feeling. And then the production, it also went out on BBC Radio Kent not long after it came out. I had an amazing chat with Dominic King, who does the art show there, about the project, which was really, really great. I always find it interesting to sort of open up and reflect on what it was like to actually make this, because now that it exists, it's so easy for us to just forget what the whole process was like, because it will feel like a blur once it's done. For me, you said the 3 hour train journey felt slow. For me, it felt really quick. I felt like we blinked and we were home.
I think it was because I was so tired and I was still doing maths to see if it actually worked the way it should have worked. I think I was overthinking as well, because there are all of the parts that you don't necessarily think about until you show up. We had everyone's schedules on the front of the script, which was super useful. But it didn't make sense to me how quickly that we could turn everything around. I thought that wouldn't work.
Yeah, I thought the parts with the actors I thought would take much longer, because I thought I'd need more time to talk with them. But I think allowing the time we did with them made things so much easier, because it meant that we could actually spend quality time with each actor with no fear of rushing. It wasn't like, okay, come in, sit down, do your lines, go. And it was nice that almost every actor we got to talk to on a one-to-one basis. I like that the script was written like that, and then the way you put the schedule together so that everyone got their time with us was really good, because we could actually question with them, hypothesize the concept.
And on the actual schedule, there was some overlap as well, so that they could talk to the person just before them, and that they could talk to you and listen to some of the recordings that we had, just for context, which was quite useful.
Yeah, it was. What was quite interesting for me is that the character of Michael he's searching really for an answer to what would happen, and so am I, in as the director writer. And in this, he's effectively, because this is sort of an audio package kind of thing. I am sort of also the character of Michael. So as I was making this, I was thinking, oh, how would Michael be making this? Because it was weird to not only be writer-director, but technically in some weird way, the main character.
Like a sort of meta character.
Yeah.
Who you named Michael Johnson.
Yeah.
I'm taking credit for the last name.
Yeah, because this is producer Daniel Johnson. And you know what? I didn't even think about that when we did things. No, it just didn't even cross my mind. I thought, suits it.
Every time they would say Johnson in the script, my ears would like prick up.
Yeah.
And I thought, surely not. No, he can't have done that on purpose.
No, that was the bit that took the longest in the edit, didn't it? Because we were kept getting confused with you.
Yeah, you kept getting my name wrong during the outro when you were reading the credits.
Did I?
You got my name wrong 3 times. You called me Samuel
Oh,
twice.
It was Samuel Morgan Davies. He was one of the actors. That's probably why. Samuel, do you know what? Because the outro I recorded for it was, I think, the last thing we recorded before we left, and because of
Took
how
the most takes.
I was so exhausted, but also reading out all those credits and all the people that were involved in this, and there are people that aren't even on the credits that helped. Sort of the class at uni, the film production class of Canterbury Christchurch University, currently of year 2. Really, really couldn't have made this project without them.
Definitely. And advice from Jane and Liz, our tutors, really made the difference, especially at the beginning, because when I got the producer package where it's all of the spreadsheets and paperwork that I need to fill out, I looked at them and I was clearly very anxious, and I said, I don't know where to start. And Liz kind of explained what she would do in that situation, which was quite useful. She basically told me to break it up into more manageable pieces, which is something I try and do anyway. I think that's kind of clear with what I normally produce. It's all in little compartments.
Yeah, and one thing I haven't mentioned is all the dialogue within this as well is paraphrased from real conversations where I had with people within my class of, if the internet's down, what would happen? And I took those real conversations and moulded that into what the script would become. So literally without the class members, we wouldn't have had much character. And my dad as well was a massive influence, because all of this concept initially came from us just spitballing ideas. Pretty much about 2 or 3 hours after Jo Nolan, the head of Screen South, she came in, as you said at the start, and had a chat with us at university. When I went home and spoke to my dad, that conversation is what led me to the idea that eventually we would go and create. So there's people that everyone on the credit list was incredible, and there was just such a bigger team behind it, all for a radio piece that came out to only about 18 minutes, which is just incredible, the journey we've been on. Thinking, Dan, for the future for other people looking to get involved in Screen South, what would you recommend for students thinking of applying, as well as people within the universities, maybe lecturers looking to talk to their students about this?
I think communication is the main thing. There are times that I think once or twice we weren't communicating as often as we should, and that slowed us down. And I think that was very clear, and instantly it kind of got fixed. That's, I think, the biggest thing for any team, especially with something so big. I think the best thing to remember is that they know that you're new. They know that you will make mistakes, and sometimes you'll hand in something that isn't quite finished. They're expecting that, especially at the early stages, and they're there to help. I always felt bad giving them a phone call or sending them an email and saying, help, I don't know what to do. But every single time they would drop everything and jump straight onto our project and help us out as much as we needed.
And they're doing so many projects at the same time. But like when I first submitted the project right at the start, I submitted a 9-day production schedule. and they laughed at it. Basically, they were like, 9 days, you're gonna get two, one for making, one for editing. And I was just completely naive at that point as to what it was like really working in the industry. But they didn't shame me for it because they knew that I clearly cared enough to at least attempt it. They wanted an attempt, and they don't mind if you don't know initially what you're doing, because they want a core idea that they can get behind. They want someone they know that's going to be passionate about driving and completing that idea. And they want someone new to the industry because they're there to help you make your next thing. In terms of next things, we are both working in both the... More so with film, but I'm working in radio, I'm making radio pieces, and I'm making film pieces. What's your next step so that if people want to follow your work and your journey, what you're making?
That's a tricky question. It's hard to be sure. I'm writing a lot of scripts. Hopefully they will become something. I really like the idea of radio and working with that. I've invested in a decent microphone. It's not paid work, but it is something that I'm trying to do just to get my voice out there. It's like a fictional radio show or just something that interests me. Video essays I'm hoping to do, or audio, like podcast essays about certain subjects that I find really interesting. They might not necessarily be like something that you'd put on television or something that you would have hundreds and hundreds of people listening, but I think finding something you're passionate about and willing to work hard on is a good place to start before you think about anything else.
And when Dan gets on with that, we'll have him back on the podcast to talk about his video essays and audio pieces sometime in the future. But no, that's great stuff. And the final result, really, well, I've got two more questions, but what do you think, or what do you feel when you listen to the final result of what we produced?
Obviously, I'm really proud of it because we wouldn't have been able to make something like that even a month before it was made. We learnt a lot. Part of me listening to it now thinks that there are some things that we've done as we've studied directing that could have pushed it just that little bit further. Obviously, it's something really proud. If I listened to it in like 5 years, I would still be incredibly proud of it because it's the best thing we could possibly have done at that time. But there are a few things that I listen to and I think, ooh, if I could do that again, it would bring it from a 9 to a 10 for me.
Yeah, and I think that's also fine though because it's our first step. And the Screen South process, if you're listening and you want to get involved, it's not really the end. So once you finish making it and you get on that train home, it isn't the end. It is really the beginning of your career because you can take that. Dan, if you are trying to become a producer on another project, you can show them what you've got. We're also going to be taking this hopefully to audio festivals and pushing this. So even the distribution of this project isn't over. But if you want to listen to it right now, please do go onto the BBC Sounds link. It'll be right at the top of the description, whether you're listening to this podcast on YouTube or SoundCloud now. We're on both platforms. And please do leave us your thoughts in the comments below. Would love to keep the conversation going because the subject of the internet going down is one I'm super interested in. So please leave your thoughts in the comments section here on YouTube, or you can contact the Facebook page if you're listening on SoundCloud at the My Generation Podcast. If you've got any comments for myself or for Dan that you would like to share about what you've been listening to. Just my final question, Dan, that I ask at the end of every single podcast, kind of regardless. What do you think you've learned by talking about the Screen South process in the last 40 or so minutes?
I think looking back, it's great to see how far we've come because I don't think that I was in a place that I could produce something with the budget that we had as far back as like maybe the end of last year because it was something completely new. And I think it's something that we've both done the best we could possibly have done at. I think we both grew a lot, and it's really good to see that looking back. And it's nice to know that we've actually made something that we wouldn't have been able to make before that.
Yeah, I think we've both had quite a productive 2019, and ended up making quite a lot of stuff together and like in other teams, in other groups. Mm-hmm. So I think it's just been a wild journey, but you're happy with what you've made.
Yeah.
And I think that concludes this week's episode of the podcast. Well, thank you for coming on, Dan.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we might have to get Dan back on the show when he's produced his video essays and audio diaries, so you are now held liable by My Generation podcast listeners.
I've said it now, it's going to happen.
Absolutely. And what microphone have you invested in?
Just a medium-ish industry road mic, kind of like this one.
Nice.
Not too bad.
Yeah, we're recording with two mics at the minute. We've got the Zoom H6 and Zoom H4. Dan's on the Fancy Nancy H6, so his voice will come out crystal clear.
Oh, wow. The audience will love it.
You can hear it. Yeah. I wish you could have seen the facial reaction that Dan just generated. Well, thank you very much for coming on the show, Dan. We'll definitely get you back on the podcast about sometime in 2020 because we've got tons of amazing episodes coming out. You would have just heard on the podcast. I'll just punt for some more stuff that's coming up in the future. This episode's going to be going out today as of the 12th of January 2020. Feels weird saying 2020 now. Last week's official podcast episode would have been James and Alara talking about the Drama Society of Canterbury Christchurch University. And next week, or the next coming episode, is the questions episode, which is the one I've been super excited to feature because it is a chain-like episode. Basically, the episode opens with me posing a question to someone. They answer it and pose a question for the next guest. And then it rolls and rolls and rolls. We've got 25 people speaking on that episode. It's really cool. I've already finished recording it. So excited to put that episode out there and bring that to you. And then we've got local Kent musicians, Renegade from Whitstable. They're coming on the podcast the week after. They're going to be talking about their music creating process. We've got the entire band on the podcast for that one. Again, it's already recorded. That was super fun. They were a really great bunch and very local to the area of Kent. So that concludes this week's episode. Thank you to Dan. Thank you for coming on, and we'll see you what's effectively this week, because this is a off-schedule episode. I never know how to end my off-schedule episodes. And we'll see you next week for the next episode of the My Generation podcast.
And news just in from the House of Commons. The Prime Minister has confirmed that all internet servers have failed.
The station started messing up, like really going wrong. And then people started pushing and shoving.
I was there for hours and hours, no food, no people, and eventually I had to try and get out.
I'm thinking this could be aliens.